Hi, I'm Josanne Wright Callender, the author of the Happy Little Garbage Truck picture book and educational program. Um, I just had been looking back. I said the last time that I've been doing this vlog for about 2 years. Well, I look back, and it was in April of 2020 that I began this channel. And it was during the pandemic and the lockdowns that I wanted to provide some help to parents and educators who were doing a lot of virtual teaching at that time. And it's kind of evolved into being this particular channel, which I was trying to like, okay, since everyone's in school now, what's my theme? And so as I thought about it, actually I wrote the Happy Little Garbage Truck to build self-confidence and self-esteem in children. And as I thought about it, it's really, and I thought about this for the first time this last week, it's really about building character in our children. As parents and as educators, we have that responsibility because children are coming into this world without any clue as to what it takes to be successful, and we're feeding them and we're seeding this attitude of mind to our children. And in school, we called it the affective domain. It's how you think and how you perceive things. So that's what we're all about at this channel. It's building character and that attitude of mind that's positive. So in looking at that, I was talking about Z. Hereford's article, Live a Life of Courage, last time, well, for quite a bit of time. But, there's so many good parts in this article that, I've just kind of thought that we should live here for a little bit. But we're kind of coming to the last part of her 5 parts of living a life of courage. And the first one was knowing that you're going to have fear, but facing it anyway. Like, feel the fear and do it anyway is the name of a book that's out there. Number 2 is developing a willingness to work on having courage. It's like, okay, you know you don't have it, but now you're going to make some efforts. And then the third step, excuse me, is noting how others display courage in their lives, either through media or real life examples. We have a whole classroom of examples of how to develop courage. And then taking small steps. You can dissect it for yourself, but what things are you lacking that are keeping you from having the courage that you seek to have? And then having faith. And this last part was kind of a surprise for me that she included faith, but it is a huge foundation of how we do anything in our lives. And so faith has been the topic of the last few videos that I've been presenting. But just yesterday, I noted an article and I refer to it in my description box, that looked at the Hebrew word of faith, which, faith comes from the realm of spirituality and theology. So the Hebrew word for faith is emunah, and that means faithfulness. So it's more than a belief in God, but a full reliance on Him. And that implies taking action. And if you really believe something, you're not going to just sit at home and say, well, okay, I believe that I could be, like Sidney Poitier, an actor, but you just stay at home and wash dishes for your job. You have to take some action. And we're going to get back to Mr. Poitier in a bit, because this came up recently and I said, I've got to touch on this before we move on. So before we take a deeper dive into the positive mindset and positive attitude, we're going to look at some of the actions that strengthen our courage. And so circling back to Mr. Poitier, it reminded me, as I am doing this one section, of a poem that my sister Sharon shared with me. And it's How We Live Between Our Dash. And that was a poem by Linda, let's see if I have her name here, Linda Ellis. And the dash is that line between when we were born and when we leave this life. And so that dash tells everything of who we are, and it can only be fulfilled once we pass on that people see who we actually were in a kind of like a snapshot. So Mr. Poitier lived a courageous life, and he lived his dash with courage. So he had principles. Like, I didn't know that he refused to part in Porgy and Bess because he didn't like the way blacks were portrayed in this Gershwin classic. So he had principle, and he purposefully looked and took roles that were multidimensional characters like himself. And this, I suppose, was his personality. So, but anyway, one thing that really surprised me too was a friend was sharing that she'd seen a documentary about Mr. Poitier, which he was, I think, was on NPR, but he was coming back and sharing different parts of what they had on his life, and he broke through this dialect, the speech barrier, and his reading was pretty abysmal when he arrived in New York, and he was a dishwasher. But I found out that his what drove him to become the great actor that he became was one of these first auditions. And he did such a horrible job that the person who was leading the audition said, just go back and be a dishwasher or something to that effect. But that lit a fire in him. And he was driven to succeed. So he took action. He did not want to be defined by being a dishwasher. And he had faith and he believed that he could be something greater. And we're so thankful that he did have that faith and that belief. But faith and action go hand in hand. And so we're going to look more about having that positive attitude that kind of keeps you going in those pursuits that look to be pretty difficult to achieve, but your positive attitude keeps you fueled. So until next time, thank you. This was a little longer than usual, but thank you for watching, and please subscribe, and we'll continue on with our conversation next week. Goodbye, and have a fantastic Friday. Bye-bye.